Welcome back, everybody. On today's witch hunt, we have the best-selling author of the gothic tale, CATHERINE Cavendish. Stick around. Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Gaby Triana. I'm the best-selling author of gothic fiction, the Haunted Florida series, Paradise Island, a Sam and Colby story, Moonchild, and lots more. On today's author show and tell, we have best-selling author CATHERINE Cavendish, yay! Who I absolutely love because we have so much in common. I love reading her stories, she reads mine. It's just what we love is the gothic atmospheric tale of hauntings and witches and things that go bump in the night. So a few of CATHERINE's books are In Darkness, Shadows Breathe, The Malin Witch, The Haunting of Henderson Close, and lots more. But I will let her tell you about it. Let's see what she has to show us today. Take it away, CATHERINE.
Hello, my name's CATHERINE Cavendish, and first of all I'd like to thank you all for coming here and to have a look at my show and tell today, but huge thanks to Gaby for inviting me. It's great fun to be here and to share something with you. For those of you who've never come across anything I've written before, I am a horror writer, but I write the sort of creepy, haunted house, supernatural, things happening in the shadows, witches, ghosts, demons, that kind of gothic and gothic horror, and some of it's set in history as well. I'm not a great one for blood and gore and scattered flying body parts. That's not really what I do best, although I have been known to dip my fingers occasionally into a little pint of Kensington gore. So, what does a horror writer like me bring along to a show and tell? Perhaps I could bring along a nice smoking cauldron. Seems to have gone out. Maybe an Ouija board. Not after the last time. Which is... no. What I bring along with me is this. Yeah, it's seen better days, hasn't it? A bit like me. A bit bruised and battered and a bit frayed around the edges. Rather like a tinned apricot. Or not. So what is this? A book. Yes, a book. Not just any book, though. Within the pages of this rather battered tome lies a deep, dark, and ultimately tragic tale of two particularly unlovable star-crossed lovers, all set in a wonderfully bleak, magnificently creepy atmosphere, gothic atmosphere. And if you needed any more prompting, who wrote the book? Well, there she is. You can see her. The lady, of course, is Emily Bronte. And what is the book? Her only published novel. And if you can see that, Wuthering Heights. Absolute masterpiece. It was a great influence on me. I bought this copy with my own pocket money when I was about 8 or 9 years old. And I read it, and of course, too young to really take it in properly then. But I did have one big advantage because I was growing up in a town called Halifax, 1,000 feet above sea level, within a very short walking distance of the moors in the West Riding of Yorkshire, or as we call it, God's own country. And those same moors, if you went a few miles further, were the very moors that in fact Emily, with her sisters Charlotte and Anne, maybe sometimes accompanied by their ultimately tragic brother Branwell, possibly by their father on occasions, they would go out in all weathers, no matter how inclement the elements should be to them that particular day. I used to ramble up on those moors and play amongst the heather and the gorse and feel the wind. Oh, it's always windy up there. The wind would whistle on a good day and just sort of kiss your cheeks, and on a blustery day or a day of storms and gales, which was most of the time, it howled, and it's an eerie sound as the wind is howling across the moors, rustling through the grasses and the heather and the gorse. And then if you have those curlews calling overhead. If you've ever heard the call of a curlew, it's the loneliest sound in the world. And the atmosphere just wraps you up in a cloak. Sometimes it's a warm cloak, and other times it's a cloak almost of damp ice. But you can't fail to be moved by it. So I was lucky to have that, and therefore I could share the experiences that Emily so perfectly conveys, the atmosphere in her novel. This has changed me a lot at that time, and over the years I read that book again and again and again, and I always get something new out of it. But the main common denominator that I get out of it, that I use in my writing and is added to me as a writer, is atmosphere. And atmosphere comes to me from engaging all the senses. So not just what the character is seeing, but what they're hearing, what they're feeling, what they can touch, what they can sense, what they can taste. And if you can convey that on the page, then you transport your reader with you. And for me, that's the fun part anyway, because you're actually reliving, if it's something experience you've had yourself, or now living for the first time with your character, everything, every aspect of what they're going through. Wuthering Heights does this. Emily, whether by accident or design, she does it absolutely in spades, as we say. She's cracked that one. One time I was particularly aware of this use of all the senses was when I was writing this book. This is a book that came out from Plum Tree Press a couple of years ago, called The Haunting of Henderson Close, and this is set in Edinburgh. Now, if you've been fortunate enough to ever visit this wonderful city, the capital of Scotland, you will have found that it's kind of tale of two cities. In the daytime, it's bustling, it's full of tourists, well, normally, full of tourists. You hear 100 languages along the Royal Mile in the space of just a few minutes. But at night, there is another Edinburgh. And during the day, you can capture some of that if you go to attractions like the Real Mary King's Close, which is an underground, renovated actually, restored network of tiny, narrow streets. The very first time I went there, and I've been there about half a dozen times now, the first time I went there, I was immediately, as soon as you get underneath, go down those stairs, you're wrapped in this atmosphere. It cloaks you again, like being up on those moors. I mean, this is a very different atmosphere. It's claustrophobic. It's silent apart from the noise of the people that you're on a tour with. They're organised short tours. And the enthusiasm of your tour guide as they're helping you to experience what people living in American King's Close would have gone through back in the day, a couple of 100 years ago. But as you go through Mary King's Close, you can feel that there's so much atmosphere there. You can smell, you can taste. There's a certain kind of dusty bitterness down there, and there's so many shadows, and you go past so many closed doors, and you would swear that behind those doors there's a little curtain twitching, and somebody or something is looking out at you. You can feel a presence behind you. Sometimes you can feel something almost apparently stroking your hair. It's a little breeze, but it feels like something is actually with you, and it's not of this world. Fabulously atmospheric. I knew the first time I went down there I was going to have to write a story based in somewhere just like that, and I did. And that was The Haunting of Henderson Close. But I mentioned that Edinburgh is another city at night, and it is, especially if you're fortunate enough to go to somewhere like Greyfriars Kirkyard. So it's Greyfriars Church, very famous church, and the kirkyard, the Scots word kirk, equals church, so it's where all the bodies are buried. At night, especially if you go on a cold, wintry night, when there's a full moon, there's going to be a frost because the sky is completely clear, and the full moon is pouring down, casting silvery beams across those gravestones, creating such deep and dark shadows, and making the bare branches of the trees ghostly and eerie. Oh boy, I would challenge anyone not to be unnerved. I wouldn't go there on my own. I went with my husband. I'm not daft. And it was just incredible because just walking around there silently at night, nobody else there. It was just us and whatever was watching us. You was just sure something was going to come out from behind one of those gravestones. Atmosphere. Shed loads of it. Needless to say, Wayfriars Churchyard, Kirkyard, also ended up in the haunting of Henderson Close. I mean, it's too good an opportunity to miss, isn't it? So, whenever I am writing, and obviously I write a lot, it's my job, it's what I do, I'm always drawing on the rules, if you like, that I learned from people like Emily, not just her, of course, Edgar Allan Poe, and the amazing and wonderful M.R. James, who are just such inspirations to me. There's no two ways about it. They all were. But time and time and time again, much as I love curling up on a stormy night in winter with my favourite M.R. James collection, I still come back to Emily Bronte and Wuthering Heights. And I have a favourite passage I'd just like to share with you. And it's not what you might think. It's not a particularly, well, it's not a gruesome one. It's not a scary one. It's actually the very final paragraph in the book. I'm not going to give any spoilers here, but suffice it to say that our narrator has taken a little detour and she's looking down now at 3 gravestones. I'm not going to tell you whose they are. You have to read it for yourself. 3 gravestones, which are, as she puts it, on a slope near the moor. And this is what she experiences. I lingered round them under that benign sky, watched the moths fluttering among the heath and harebells, listened to the soft wind breathing through the grass, and wondered how anyone could ever imagine unquiet slumbers for the sleepers in that quiet earth. Wow, powerful stuff. You see how she's created that atmosphere, how she takes you with her in just that one paragraph. That's why Emily Bronte is such an influence on me, and why this is my prized possession for show and tell. Needless to say, the Brontes, I had to write a book about them. Well, not quite, but a book inspired by them, and that's this one. That's The Garden of Bewitchment, Flame Tree Press again, and this is about a tale of 2 sisters, essentially, both of whom were obsessed with the Brontes, but the younger one of the 2 is obsessed with Branwell Bronte, so the ultimately tragic brother, who she believes to be still alive. He comes to see her, even though her sister, the more practical Evelyn, insists he's dead. He's been dead for 40 years. This is set at the end of the 19th century, and as its name implies, things start to go horribly wrong when a toy garden appears, and Evelyn's sense of reality is severely challenged when things really do start to hot up in the Garden of Bewitchment. Just before I go, just share with you my latest one. It's a plug for my latest book. Okay, In Darkness, Shadows Breathe, because here again, I'm incorporating lessons that I learned from Emily and from the best writers both today and of the past when it comes to creating atmosphere. Here we have 2 women. They should never normally have met, but they both share the fact that they are, in one case, living on land, in luxury apartments as it happens, which is built on land which formerly housed an asylum and workhouse orphanage back in Victorian days, and where some horrible experiments were done and all sorts of evil practices, and there was a creeping evil within that building. And that building was huge and is extended further into what is now the modern hospital. And in both cases, the flats and the hospital, the builders used reclaimed materials from the original Victorian building. Unfortunately, in using those, they imported the evil that was already lurking in those buildings. So these poor women have rather a lot to go through, to put it mildly. There's a lot of me in this book. There's more of me in this book than any of my others, actually, for reasons which should become obvious if you get round to reading it. So I'm going to go now. You've had enough of me. Thank you again to Gaby, and thank you so much to all of you for joining me today. It's been a lot of fun. I hope to see you again soon. hopefully, maybe, you never know, in person when we're allowed to. Meanwhile, if you want to give my books a try, you can find them on online bookstores, your favourite ones, or better still, pop down to your local bookshop. If they haven't got them on the shelf, I'm sure they'll be delighted to order them for you. I'm Catherine Cavendish, and I'm saying to you now, as Stephen King always says, read more scary stories. You know it makes sense. Goodbye. Take care. Don't have too many nightmares.
Thank you so much for being here, Catherine, and thanks for showing us your battered copy of Wuthering Heights, one of my favorites as well. I read it in high school, and it's just the classic example of that atmospheric tale, isn't it? My favorite is Edgar Allan Poe. That's where I learned that kind of story, that genre from. And I don't know what it is about it. You know, people, and a lot of people, I bet you get this a lot of people tell us that, well, that's not really horror. Well, yes, it is. It's creepy. It's what you cannot see. It's just a tale of dread and ghosts and what should have been, and darkness and depression and what it does to a person. So it really is very much the basis of horror. And maybe it's not slasher, and it's not gore, and it's not spilled guts, but it doesn't need to be, because the sadness is there. And I think that's what Emily does so well, and others like her, was just developing that sense of, that permeated sense of sadness, of melancholy. So thank you so much for being here, Catherine. We really appreciate you taking the time to show us your copy of Wuthering Heights. I don't have an old copy like you. I wish I did. But thanks for sharing. Thanks for being on the show. We love you, and I look forward to reading your new book. Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.